All right, welcome to Local Lunch. It's still summer here in Toronto, and I'm here with, it's me, Hugh, with Bo today. Hi, Bo.
Hi.
So, how's it going?
Good.
Okay, great.
It's a nice summer day outside.
It's a beautiful day. It's been a great summer, and a great summer for sailing, and we've got Richard Hudson joining us here. We're going to talk about sailing. But first of all, how do you guys know each other?
We know each other through a professional speaking class that Speaker Slam folks run.
Okay.
Called the Emerging Speakers Mastermind. And that's how we know each other.
It's an inspirational speakers group.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you're combining the speaking with the sailing, Richard?
I've been speaking about my sailing for a long time, and I'm moving my speaking about my sailing to be more about inspiring people to go and pursue whatever their dreams are, their adventures, and using a lot of my sailing stories to illustrate ways of doing that and to inspire people and talk about the challenges of going off and doing your own thing.
Okay. And your website's isuma.com?
That's correct. And
no, we've been waiting to find out what and why that's the name.
Yeah, you said Asuma was the name of your sailboat.
Yeah, so the Suma is the name of my current sailboat, which I sailed around the Americas in. We'll follow up on that later.
Yeah.
Talk about that. And the reason for the name Asuma. Now, Asuma is the Inuktitut word for knowledge, idea, wisdom, or mind. Now, which doesn't seem to have anything to do with sailing. And the story there is, I lived in New York City for many years, and when I was down there, I was doing computer consulting, and I needed a name for my company, and I wanted something that was like intellectual sounding, something like that, and all the names I could think of were taken. All the English names I could think of were taken.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, New Yorkers don't speak a lot of Inuktitut.
Right.
So I had my Inuktitut dictionary because I'd lived in Arctic Canada for a few years before that, and I just picked that name out of it. So I named my company Asuma, okay, and I had the domain name asuma.com, and it was a computer consulting company. And then I bought this boat in France, and it had a name, Chikin number 5. And the word Chikin didn't mean anything to me, it was just a name. But I was concerned that, the word sank in French sounds an awful lot like sank in English. And I thought, as soon as I call up on the radio, everyone's going to try and rescue me because they think I'm sinking. Right. So I thought, no, this is a terrible name. Why don't I just use this domain name I have and make that the name of the boat? So the boat's name actually means knowledge, idea, wisdom, or mind.
Okay.
So they don't confuse that with your computer company, do they?
Well, no, I shut down the computer company.
Okay.
So so first of all, how did you, can you tell us the story of how you came to be a sailor? Like, when did you start? How did that all work? And you obviously fell in love with it somehow.
Yeah, I was 12 or 13, and I'd never been in a canoe. I'd never really been in a boat before, but I'd read both chapters in the Scout manual on canoeing, and I knew them. Like anything that you could learn from the Scouting manual on canoeing, I knew. I had read those back to front many times, and I'd saved up enough money for my paper routes that I could afford a canoe.
That's what I did.
Did you?
Seriously, yeah.
Oh,
I wish I had
it's
done
the
it.
way to do it.
Yeah.
So then I told my parents, who were really not water people, that, okay, I'm going to buy a canoe. And they said, no, you're not. At the time, I was born in Toronto, and Harbourfront was offering these free sailing lessons for 12 to 14-year-olds, somewhere in that range, the age I was. And my mother found out about this, and she said, hey, why don't you go do this sailing thing? And so I went down and did the sailing thing for a week, and I thought, oh, this is great, forget canoeing. I'm just going to, I want to go sailing. And so I got on a training ship in Toronto, and I worked on that in the winter, and I sailed on that in the summer, and I did about 6,000 miles of sailing with them, and that's the Pathfinder. They're still around. They're for 14 to 18-year-old teenagers. And then I was really trying hard to sail around the world. And I recently found, as I'm cleaning out my father's house, I found this piece of paper that I'd written when I was 15 and signed. Because I'd read, it's a goal-setting thing. I read that you should write down your goal and sign it. And was determined to sail around the world in a 15-foot boat, and I dated it and all this. And what happened with that plan is I really could not afford the boat. My paper routes did not actually provide enough money for a sailboat, and I put that on hold. But I never pulled it. I only put it on hold for a while, and I ultimately got back to it. I got a much bigger boat and did it that way, and it took me many years. But
Did you sail around the world?
I've sailed around the Americas. So
Okay, we have a map, right?
Yeah.
Of your journeys?
Yeah. So I didn't, instead of taking the classic route around the world, I did a harder route, which, because I really like the high latitudes. So I bought my boat in France, and then I went down to South America, and then up to Greenland, across the Northwest Passage.
You did the Northwest Passage?
I did the Northwest Passage, yes. It took me 4 attempts. On my 4th attempt, I did succeed. And I went down to Vancouver. I worked in Vancouver for a couple of years. And then I went down to Mexico and down to Easter Island and then to Chile. And wintered in Chile. And in spring, went down the Patagonian coast of Chile. And then I went down to Antarctica. It doesn't show on the map, but from Antarctica to South Africa and Namibia, and then up to the U.S. and Canada and to Newfoundland.
Holy cow.
How long did it take to do that?
So that was very indirect. It was not all at once. So that was 8 years, and it included a lot of time not sailing.
So you would get off to lived in certain places
Yeah.
in between your sailing?
Yeah. So there was like a couple years between Brazil and Argentina and Uruguay. I was there for a couple years, and pretty much a year in Chile, and a couple years in Vancouver, and half a year in Alaska. I wintered in Toronto inside that time. So a lot of places.
Wow.
Now, why do you like the high latitudes so much?
They're stunningly beautiful. They're really challenging. They're difficult and dangerous, but I love the challenge of them, and just being out that huge, wide open space, and all on your own, and knowing you got there on your own. It's a really nice thing. I'm also don't like the heat.
Oh, really? So here's now. This is that your
this
boat?
is going to extremes. Yes.
That's
that is my boat.
And this is where?
So this is in Chile, in southern
right.
Chile,
Okay.
and this is a glacier called Seno Iceberg, and this boat. Yeah. So I have a 50-foot steel boat. It was designed for Antarctica, especially designed to withstand ice and to be very strong and withstand big seas. So it took me all day to get this picture. I put one of my crew in the dinghy, and then I sailed back and forth.
Oh, really?
In front of them in the dinghy until we finally, taking
Staged.
pictures. Yeah, because you got to get someone off the boat with a camera. I guess nowadays you have drones, but I didn't have a drone then. That was 2015, 2016 when I did that. But I didn't have a drone, and so. Somehow someone's got to be with a camera somewhere else to take that picture.
So that's a 50-foot steel boat.
Yes.
How many crew on a boat like that?
How many crew? Well, ideally there's 3 or 4.
Yeah.
But I have single-handed the boat about 18,000 miles, which is about a quarter of the miles I put on the boat. So it's certainly something you can single-hand, but it's a lot easier if you have crew.
Mm-hmm. So, and is this the boat? Is this your main? Is this a Suma?
Yes, this is a Suma.
So this is the boat you sailed all over the place, but it is made for Antarctica.
Yeah, it's designed for Antarctica, for high latitudes, for ice, for rough seas.
And you bought it from someone in France?
That's correct.
What was their mission? Were they also exploring the high and low latitudes, or high latitudes?
Yes, they had. These boats were sold for owner completion. I think there was 25 of them made. I'm not quite sure.
Right.
And the first owner unfortunately died before he really did anything with the boat. The second owner finished it, did the interior, and got the boat together. And he sailed it 50,000 miles. He was in Argentina getting ready to go down the Straits of Magellan and into the Pacific. And his mainsail completely ripped, and he just thought it was becoming too much of a trouble, and so he sailed back to France.
Oh.
And then he sold it to me, and I bought the boat in France.
It ripped on the journey.
Yeah,
Because
I
of
mean,
the-
it ripped completely, not to a point that I think it was old and weak, and he couldn't
But he was
stitch it
going
back
around
together.
the horn, and that's where he got it.
Well,
Or
he was
approaching.
he
the
was
horn?
still he was broaching it. Yeah,
Mhm.
so he had a spare mainsail. That's the mainsail, and so he sailed back to France with that.
Okay. So, what's the difference between, say, the Arctic and the Antarctic, in your experience?
The difference between the Antarctic and the Arctic, it's the wildlife is different because you have polar bears in the Arctic, and you have penguins in the Antarctic. The navigation is somewhat different. You'll still get big storms in the Arctic, but like for instance in Arctic Canada, you don't have such wide open spaces.
Mhm.
You tend to go. You don't go as far distances away from land.
Right.
Versus the Southern Ocean, which is like the sea just north of Antarctica, you call the Southern Ocean. There's no landmass to interrupt that, so
Right.
weather systems that go west around the world, from west to east around the world, they generate the biggest seas in the world, are in what we call the Southern Ocean, just north of Antarctica. So you have bigger seas there.
Mm-hmm.
The ice is in Antarctica. If you want to avoid the ice, you go north. Generally speaking, the farther north you go, the warmer it is, the less ice. If you're in northern Canada, can we pull the map up? It's different. Like if you're trying to go through the Northwest Passage, the amount of ice depends on the wind direction.
Mhm.
So if the wind is from the north, then ice from north will come and block the passage, even if it's warm.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's a south wind, then the ice moves away, and you
So
can
you
go
can-
through. So whether you get trapped by the ice or not, it's not that you can go south to avoid it. You're kind of in there, and whether you can go through or not in a given year entirely has more to do with the wind system, whether the wind is going from the north or south,
Okay.
than it does with how cold it's been that year.
So, when you did the Northwest Passage, what year was that?
2011.
2011, and I guess it's kind of an iffy thing. You don't know if you can actually make it or not.
That's correct. Yeah, you go up there, you get 75 degrees north, and you need to. It's not going to open until mid-August, if it opens, and then you need to get through
Fast.
fairly quickly because the autumn storms start.
Yeah.
And once you're through the Northwest Passage, if you're into the Bering Sea, I mean, it's a rough place.
Yeah.
Or if you're going the other way and you're into Baffin Bay, it's a rough place. There are rough
Right.
places in the autumn.
Yeah.
So you must have had a lot of interesting experiences on your travels there. Is there anything that you can share with us?
Any particular interesting experiences?
Where you got
There's-
stuck, or
there's-
and you managed to get out of the situation, or
There's many interesting experiences. I can tell you. Well, I'll tell you one. I was in Antarctica. I was in Elephant Island. It's a little island. Antarctica is everything 60 degrees south latitude. So it's not just the continent. There's some islands around it. And we were preparing for a storm, and we anchored the boat in preparation for a storm. We had weather forecasts, so we knew the storm was coming. And I was afraid the anchor would drag because the bottom was like that. I was afraid the anchor would drag and we'd blow out to sea. And you don't want to be at sea in an Antarctic storm around all the ice and the waves and the serious wind. So I was, in addition to the anchor, I rowed an anchor. I wanted to row a rope and a wire to shore, to some rocks on shore, so we could tie the boat to the shore. Okay, so I got in my little rowing dinghy with 100 meters of rope and wire, and I was rowing only about 30, 50 meters away from the boat to get to some rocks to tie the wire and the rope around and then come back to the boat, and I lost my oar.
Your oar?
I lost one of my oars, and I didn't have a spare with me.
Oh, no.
And I'm desperately trying to paddle the boat with one oar, just paddle like with one oar, and the wind is catching me, and I'm trying to get back to my boat, and I get close to my boat, not close enough, and I yelled to my crew to throw me a line, and that didn't work so well. None of the lines actually reached me, and I blew past the boat, and I'm being blown out to sea in this little open dinghy with one oar, and there's nothing downwind of me for 18 miles. Then there's this rocky shore that you'd never survive landing on. So there's just waves and ice, and the storm is building. And so I yelled to my crew to come and get me, and they had troubles getting the anchor up to come and get me. And so I'm just being blown out to sea, watching my boat get smaller and smaller and smaller in the distance, and knowing that there's really not a lot I can do. I really need my crew to come and get me. And they did come and get me. It took an hour. They had problems, but they resolved them, and they did figure it out, and they came and got me. But that was
Must have been scary.
that was quite scary.
Yeah.
And what was the temperature at that
The
time?
temperature at that point was
Yeah.
probably 5 degrees.
And what time of year?
That was summer. That was end of January, early February. Summer in the southern hemisphere.
See, I want to ask you, Richard, because there's a lot of talk these days on the internet about flat Earth and stuff like that, and I've heard that. One of the things that people cite when they're trying to argue for the flat Earth is that, and the way that it would work is that Antarctica is not an island with a shore like that. It's actually a circle of ice around the world, right?
Okay.
And so they're saying that when they do the and that messes up with the navigation. Apparently, some Antarctic explorers, their reckonings were off at the end of the day, because according to a globe Earth model, they would have gone this far, but because they're actually going around the outside, it was taking them longer. I don't know. Did you have any?
I'm not aware of that. I do recall in northeast Newfoundland, there's this on the island of Fogo, they have the Flat Earth Society.
Yeah.
Has a cafe,
Uh-huh.
and they've got some pictures on the wall explaining how they determined the Earth was flat.
Yeah.
From making a skidoo trip and observing the horizon.
That's all you need. Skidoo.
I think they had several cases of beer too. It's a great little cafe, yeah. They not only did they determine the Earth was flat, but they determined that they were in one of the four corners of the Earth.
See, that's just disinformation. So, did you have any in all your adventures any evidence to suggest the world might be flat?
I seem to have missed that evidence.
Okay.
I wasn't looking. Maybe I didn't look in the right places.
Okay. Just thought I'd ask. Did you set foot on mainland Antarctica when you were down there?
I set foot on the Antarctic Peninsula. On the islands near the Antarctic Peninsula. We didn't go all the way to the continent. It was a heavy ice year, and we didn't go all the way to the Antarctic continent.
Okay. And
so it was about 100 miles, I think, across the strait to get to Antarctica.
Still,
the
that's
continent.
wow.
So I went to the islands of Antarctica.
And the seas were big. Were they? Were there any other tense moments out in the open sea where?
The seas were on that trip. The seas were never. The seas were at most 8 meters, which is a lot, and there was. I lucked out on this trip. Anytime the winds were really, really severe, I was in port. That's part of that is planning and paying a lot of attention to weather, but there's also a amount of luck, because it's really a windy place.
Just regarding your Northwest Passage, because people talk about, the other thing is global warming, right? Did you see any evidence of that on your trip?
I didn't see that up north, but and I did see that in Patagonia and Antarctica, and the reason I saw it there and not up north was because if you're going to see that, you got to know what it looked like before.
Yeah.
And I didn't go near that many glaciers in Greenland and northern Canada. In Chile and Antarctica I did. Yeah. And when you have your chart, it tells you when the surveys were done, and like what year the surveys were done, and it shows you the positions of the glaciers, and then you go down there and you see that the glaciers receded a few kilometers or miles. Then you can tell, and you know how many years it's been since it was here, and it's now here. So you see that evidence. I didn't really visit any glaciers in northern Canada, and so I didn't see that. But it's just because I couldn't see what was the before versus the after. So I didn't see it, but that I didn't not see it. It's just I didn't see it.
Okay. Now, where's the Asuma now?
The Suma is now ashore in northeast Newfoundland, Twillingate, Newfoundland, and I'm working to. Next summer, I'm going to be taking people out on sailing adventures in Newfoundland and Labrador on my Asuma.
Okay, great. And you're inspiring people to just be adventurous and.
That's right. I think people should go out and go after their goals, and whatever that dream is. Like, it doesn't have to be sailing. For me, it's clearly sailing, but it doesn't have to be sailing. But whatever your dream is, it can definitely be scary to go and pursue your dream, and there's often not a lot of inspiration available, or there's the reverse of inspiration, people telling you no, you should stay in your job, but it can be a wonderful thing to go off and do your own adventures, and I like to encourage that in people.
Okay, cool. So, I mean, you guys met through a speaking thing. Are you speaking on this, Richard, or how are you? People watching this, if they want to come and, I don't know, get inspired. I mean, how do they do that?
I give presentations to all kinds of groups, and they can contact me on my website. They can find my website and the contact information there.
Okay.
Well, he invited us as part of the speaker program to come and practice on his boat. So I went once. It was pretty cool.
But not the Asuma, though, right? That was
no,
a different
not the
boat?
Asuma.
Yeah, I have a much smaller boat in Pickering, and I take people out I go sailing on that boat for various reasons. One of which is for people to go practice public speaking and sailing, and it's a cool little thing because sailing, you've got all the wind noise, you've got to hang on, you can't just you got to think about how your gestures are going to work. You've got to talk loudly and up over the wind. You can't if you're trying to do it from a paper. Well, you probably don't have a hand to hold the paper.
Do you get them to climb the mast at all, ever? When they can only gesture with one hand while they're hanging up?
You have to hang on at all times anyway.
So they can reach you at asuma.com and come sailing
they can
with you.
Go check out asuma.com, or you can go check out my YouTube channel, which is, you just look for Schooner Asuma, Schooner space ISSUMA on YouTube, and you can find me that way.
Okay.
Either way.
That's great. Well, this has been great to have this conversation. I feel like I've been on a bit of an adventure, and so thanks for coming in. And
thanks for having me here.
Yeah.
And Bo, thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're gonna take a little break. We got more coming up. We got Yuli coming on the show next after this. ThatChannel.com will be